Just Stop Oil launching biggest ever, I think, slow march today. This was 200, targeting 14 locations across the capital city today. The climate change group has pledged to paralyze London over the coming weeks with slow marching columns 10 times bigger than any previous marches. Violence spilled out during this morning's rush hour as lobby groups yet again disrupted traffic and crucial road networks. The Met Police said it removed 183 protesters and arrested 21 so far. Chloe Naldrett is a spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. Afternoon to you, Chloe.
Hello, Ian. Thank you for having me on today.
It's a pleasure. Nice to have you. I'm assuming you weren't nicked and arrested by dint of the fact we're sitting here talking.
That's correct.
Tell us a bit more about it. What was the deal here? So it was just ever present in as many places as you can. Does it speak for itself? More profile for your cause?
Well, it does. I mean, it's not my cause, Ian, it's our cause. And I just want to address, I've come into this conversation and just listened to some of what your previous guest was saying. And I think your listeners need to be really aware that anyone who is telling them that this is not an emergency and that this is not an extreme situation that we're in that threatens everything that we rely on to live safe and comfortable lives is being lied to. And any suggestion that there's nothing to worry about at the moment is simply misleading and borderline criminal, because what people need to be extremely aware of at the moment is that these heat waves are exactly why we're on the roads. So what's happening is that the fossil fuel emissions that we are creating that power our global economy, they're creating a blanket of pollution around the earth, and that is trapping heat into our atmosphere. And that is why we're seeing temperatures that have never been recorded throughout the period of time in which humans have existed and thrived on this earth right now. We've just had the hottest week ever recorded in the last 100,000 years.
Can I just, Chloe,
in which humanity has thrived.
Just on that point, because yeah. I come at this from, arguably a very naive standpoint. So I'm just asking questions here on all sides of this discussion. I don't suppose I'm much different from many other people on this, so I absolutely stand to be educated. But when you look around us in terms of fossil fuels, I'm sure you will give me numbers that counter everything I'm about to say. I look at a world that uses far less of this stuff than anything we ever did before. We're unrecognisable in terms of how we fuel our cars. Industry, if you look at the machinery and the big old chimneys that we used to have blurting out guff and all sorts of toxic nonsense, all of that, not everywhere in the world, but certainly in many countries in the world, it looks nothing like it did even 20, 30 years ago. The way we insulate our homes, the things we make roads out of, the type of things we make products out of, the stuff we don't make at all anymore. How can it be worse now than it was 30 years ago?
Well, Ian, thank you for, essentially admitting to the fact that this isn't an issue on which you're especially well educated, and thank you for inviting me to come back at you on that. This is the most important issue that humanity has ever faced, and I think it is your duty as a broadcaster to really get yourself up to speed on this and not be repeating incorrect information to your viewers. They deserve better than that.
Which is why I'm asking the question, because that's the perception most of us have, that we drive around in different cars, we have industry looks like it never looked before. We can't be using more oil than we were 30 years ago. Or are you going to tell me we are?
Because emissions are still rising. Emissions are going up all the time. So how much more oil? We're expanding all the time.
How much more oil do we use as a country than we used 3 decades ago?
I can't tell you that information. I'm a climate activist. You could get an energy expert on here to talk to you about that.
That's central to your very point, isn't it?
Well, no. What's central to my point is that we need to
fossil fuels. We are digging for oil. We're using all the stuff that.
But you don't know. Statistics. And if you would like statistics on that, I suggest you get an energy expert to come and talk to you. I'm a mum of 2.
You're just saying we use more without knowing how much more. It might even be less.
Emissions.
But you were talking to me about education a second ago, and you don't actually know the answer to a fundamental question in your own argument. I have that information
from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That's the UN's climate experts.
But you don't have that information.
The top 1,000 scientists. Well, look, I don't need to have that information. All I need to do is explain to you why I am here as a mother taking this kind of action while we look at a world which is becoming too hot for us to live in. What that means, these rising temperatures, it means that we can't grow crops. It means that we're going to have a water crisis. It means my children are going to be fighting other children for food and for water within their natural lifespan.
Do you think that's going to happen in this country? We'll have kids, my kids will be fighting your kids for food and water?
I think that's exactly where we're going, unless we listen very clearly to what we're being told about how we need to move safely away from the era of fossil fuels.
But you don't know. But you don't know amounts. It sounds like you like the headline, but you're not sure of the detail, and that concerns me a little bit, Chloe.
Well, that's not my job being here to speak to you on behalf of Just Stop Oil. There are energy experts and climate scientists who would come on and tell you that information. You're literally called Just Stop Oil, but you don't know whether we use more or less of it. I'm telling you we use more oil. Our emissions are rising. That's a verified fact. That's verified by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I don't need to be a climate scientist.
If I were to check the literally oil consumption of this country per capita, it would be greater today than it was in 1972.
Correct.
You're confident of that?
I'm absolutely confident of that.
Okay, answer me this if you can.
That's why we need to transition away from fossil fuels and onto safe, sustainable, green, renewable energy, which will cost us less. So it will help people who are unable to heat their homes in the winter.
Okay.
And it will not be contributing to that.
But we are transitioning in that direction, of course. We are transitioning.
But nowhere near fast enough, Ian. We're sending £236 million of taxpayers' money in this country every week to the fossil fuel industry in subsidies. We're not investing anything like that in renewable technology.
In terms of people coming on board with this, can you name a government anywhere in the world that agrees with everything you've just said?
Well, the governments of France, for example, is absolutely taking this seriously in a way that our government is not. There's they've got a very different energy infrastructure, as you know, in France. Well, we need a very different energy infrastructure here. We need a smart grid that can cope with the renewable energy that we need in order to be able to move it from where it's being generated and store it and get it to where it's needed. And there's a report coming out later this week from DEFRA, which is on the National Adaptation Programme, and it says that our response to global heating, which is going to affect the UK, is very weak. It lacks urgency and it lacks
But who
scale.
around the world is, bearing in mind, you've just drawn a picture, if you like, of our children fighting over food in their lifetime. I've got young kids as well, in their lifetimes. So with that in mind, I mean, do you think that Rishi Sunak or Scholz or Biden or any of these people really want to put their name to that? I mean, they didn't take them a second to act when they thought COVID was going to kill so many people. Why would they be that relaxed? Does it not lead you to believe that maybe you're kind of getting perhaps a little ahead of yourself on how bad this is going to be, and there is a room to transition rather than this one-size-fits-all sledgehammer response which you guys are looking for? Because no government agrees with you. That's a bit odd, isn't it?
We're not asking you to take a sledgehammer, and actually no new oil is Labour policy.
But no government...
And it's very likely that Labour will form the next government and this will be part of their policy.
Well, that might be one part of it, but it won't address all the things you guys are looking for.
Biden in the United States has passed the most important piece of climate legislation in the Western world.
They are drilling like they've never drilled in their life down there in the deep south.
But they also have an astonishingly important piece of climate legislation. China, which of course is still, for whom coal is still a problem, have tripled their solar capacity in the last 2 years. They have, but it's also a massive,
country as well. But they continue to build more coal-powered.
Yeah, but our government is behind, and it's behind on its own targets.
But it doesn't matter whether it's up. I mean, this is a collective, right? It would have to be a global.
We've all got to do it.
So no country is doing what you really want them to do, and surely you must scratch your head on that and wonder why that would be.
I don't want to scratch my head or wonder. I know exactly why it is. It's because our economies are controlled by the CEOs of the energy companies who think there's still a bit more profit to wring out of their business. That's
a false argument, isn't it? The idea that they're going to, doing a favour for their mates at Shell or BP for the destruction of the inevitable destruction of the planet.
Our government took £3.5 million from fossil fuel lobbyists just last year. Just last year. They love to talk about Dale Vince, who's supporting Just Stop Oil and is contributing some money to Labour over a number of years. They took £3.5 million from fossil fuel lobbyists just last year. So until we solve that problem, until our governments can break free of the relationship
you think that Rishi Sunak was seduced to destroying the planet by £3.5 million? I don't believe you believe that, Chloe.
I think that the interests of the Conservative Party are
for £3.5 million quid. The planet's going to die, but we got £3.5 million quid. We won't be alive in 10 years.
They are intrinsically linked with the interests of the status quo, and that status quo is held by the CEOs of the companies like BP and Shell.
So they're happy for the planet to die for a few donations, which will mean nothing because the planet will have died.
They seem to think that there's more profit to be wrung out of their
and you'd apply that to France and Germany and all the rest of it. Listen, Chloe, I have to stop there for no other reason than time. Thank you, Chloe Naldrett, who's a spokesperson for Just Stop. Or I'm not sure we got any further on some of that there, but thank you to her. She explained her position. What's your response to that? 0344 499 1000.